Good morning, everyone. Why don't we get started? This is the October meeting of the Long Island Committee. Is there anyone who wants to make public comments? Go right ahead, Oren.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. First comment I'd like to say is an agenda item. It's the minutes. It says in public comment, there were 3 public speakers, none of whom spoke on Long Island Railroad agenda items. If you look at the Metro North Committee report minutes, they do mention what we say. It's important for you to know what we say, and doing this means to us, sends a message that we don't care and we don't matter. And that's wrong.
I think the reason for that is because the September meeting was a joint meeting, so the minutes are the same, so you actually spoke at either one in that context. I think that's why it happened. It's not on purpose.
All right. Well, that's a very good, acceptable reason. Thank you very much, Jim.
You're welcome.
Also, what I did want to bring up is a campaign that New Jersey Transit has. It's called the Route Zone, and they have these cute little seat drops that say to people what is rude, and one of them is loud talking on cell phones. New Jersey Transit does have quiet cars, but even in the other cars, people talking in loud voices on their cell phones is rude, and it's just one of the parts of their campaign. And it's a good idea maybe for the Long Island Railroad to look into. The other thing is, and I've passed it out also before, is this information that New Jersey Transit now has a complete system online through the application for smartphones, where you can not only get train information, but you can buy your tickets and also contact New Jersey Transit if you have a complaint. This is a comprehensive system. And what I heard at the last Long Island Railroad Committee meeting was that you dropped having web sales of tickets, which means you have to go buy a physical ticket. Well, this is a system that works. The MTA is trying to contract with a person to come up with a system that has not yet gone live. You should really consider possibly using the New Jersey Transit system and piggyback on it so you can have through ticketing. It's a good system. You ought to look into it. And if there is problems of adopting that system, I think you can come back and explain why you can't use theirs. But theirs has been proven to be very successful. And there's just one final item, is New Jersey Transit's running more trains into Penn Station with their new dual mode, or dual powered they call them, locomotives. And I think it would be a great idea if the Long Island Railroad would look into these equipment and see if possibly they can make some test runs of that equipment out on the Long Island Railroad for the possibility of through service. It has proven in the past that New Jersey Transit equipment could run all the way up to New Haven on the New Haven line for football games, so maybe something could be done also working with New Jersey Transit to test this equipment on the Long Island Railroad so that you could run through service from New Jersey right out to Long Island using that equipment. It's worthwhile, and I think you should look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Oren, I will let you know that at today's Capital Program Committee meeting, which I believe is 1:30, there is a report on the new ticket sales system. So that may hopefully answer one of your questions with regard to that system. You're welcome. Murray?
So I'm waiting for a picture to come up.
Oh.
My name is Murray Bowden. I live in Hartsdale, New York, and I'm not a youngster anymore. Morning, Pat. Morning, Mitch.
Good morning.
Pat, I'd like to meet with you to discuss the railroad crossing lights in East Hampton next to the lumber yard. At that junction, I've sent you the picture, you have both the red flashing lights and traffic lights. The reality of it is you don't need both. The red flashing lights were designed 75 years ago. I can't think of anything that hasn't been redesigned in 75 years. 75 years ago, you had red and green traffic lights. Today, you have red, yellow, and green. The electronics are all there because you turn the traffic lights red, the standard traffic lights, when train comes. So there's no electronic problem. The amount of money Long Island Railroad would save by removing that stanchion for maintenance and everything else would be saved. What you're doing is just saying, for heavy railroad, we use flashing red lights, which are confusing and actually mean stop and then go if you think it's safe. A traffic light with a red light camera is going to reduce people going around the gates enormously. You base the weight of the traffic of the rail car. If it's heavy rail, it gets flashing red lights. If it's light rail, like Boston, Newark, everywhere else, it gets traffic lights. The reality of it is there is no reason to use the red flashing lights anymore. People are distracted. They're not paying attention. Pat, will you meet?
New York City is one of the most challenging.
What was that? Oh,
Pat, will you meet with me?
I told you, Mary, anytime.
I can't hear you. Turn the mic on.
I told you, Mary, anytime.
Anytime? Before you leave today, let's schedule a meeting. Is that okay?
I don't have my calendar with me right now, Mary.
All right, but you're committed to meet with me.
Call the office.
Okay, I want this on a record because when they search it, were you notified previously of a situation that you could take care of, that you followed up on it?
thank you. Anyone else? Okay, approval of the minutes, the joint meeting of September 21st. Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Any changes to the work plan, Pat?
No changes.
No changes to the work plan. And so let's go into the agency reports. Pat?
Good morning. Number of items I'd like to cover with you this morning. And first is a successful project that we did this past weekend at Ellison Avenue. It was a significant project in terms of the impact it had on the operations of the Long Island Railroad. The bridge is one, it's an overhead bridge over the railroad on our main line in the village of Westbury, which is in the stretch, the two-track stretch that's our busiest portion of our railroad between Queens Village and Hicksville. So we had to build this bridge, erect this bridge over the tracks. Previously, if you may remember, we actually demolished the old bridge over the course of a weekend back in the springtime. So this was the point where we erected the new superstructure over the track, and I'm happy to report it was a successful construction project, and more than just the construction project. Because of the outage that we had in place, our maintenance forces jumped in and did a tremendous amount of work over the course of the weekend. I think we had 6 or 7 of our own projects in that stretch that we planned to take advantage of the outage and to work as efficiently as we can to therefore have little impact on future operations through that area. Second item I want to talk about is another upcoming project, and this upcoming project is similar to one that we did last fall, and that is this is the second of 6 cutovers that need to be done at our Harold interlocking as part of the East Side Access Project. This is a project that will, for the course of a weekend, take a major portion of Harold out of service. We will run a normal service schedule, but I do have to tell you that our, if anything were to go wrong, our ability to recover is very, very limited. We're going to operate over that weekend. It's the weekend of November 14th, 15th, at roughly 50% of the capacity that it normally exists in Harold interlocking. As I said, this is one of 6, actually the second of 6 that we need to do. So it's important that we continue to progress these so we can get the East Side Access project on schedule, which would make Michael happy. It's an important project, but it is one that is very significant in terms of the manpower that we need to assign to it, and it's not just our manpower, it's also Amtrak and obviously Michael's contractors that are doing a lot of the work out there. So this will cut over the new bungalow at Harold. Third item I want to talk about a little bit is what we call our Mid-Suffolk Yard. And our Mid-Suffolk Yard is at Ronkonkoma, and it is a project where we actually are enlarging the existing yard at Ronkonkoma, which currently has capacity of 12 tracks, and we're roughly going to double the size of that yard. In order to undertake that project, we had to buy a piece of property from the town of Islip and move forward with an environmental review of that project under the state SECRA regulations. We advertised the draft environmental statement back in July. The public review of that document ran through early September, and I'm happy to report we're now at the point that we have finalized and issued this past Friday the final EA, in which we determined that there is no significant environmental impact due to the project. So we're now at the point that we will move forward with the project. It will go forward with design effort. The design will take it to a 30% level, which is considered preliminary engineering, and at that level, we will award a design build contract to initiate the project. It's an important project for the East Side Access Project because we need places to store and maintain the enlargement of the Long Island Railroad fleet, and this is a major location that we will use for that effort. The thing I want to mention a little bit is something that's been in the news, and that's positive train control. We have had a number of discussions on positive train control. It is very hopeful that Congress this week potentially will consider an extension to the 2015 deadline. A number of properties, and it's the reason I wanted to mention, have already asked their boards to take action in terms of saying they're not going to run service if the extension is not granted. Most of those properties are largely operated on freight carriers who have basically said we're not going to provide service for commuter rail if an extension is not granted. So at this point in time, we've not considered that, but it is something that you should be aware of, and you may have questions because of the information that's out there, and I just thought it was important to mention it, but it is something that hopefully will be addressed in the very near term down in Washington. The next item I want to mention is listed as an information item, but I would like to include it here, and that is the homeless outreach program. Both Judy Walker and Chief Ernie Pasillo are here and can answer any questions that you may have on the program. But there's two pieces to it. One is the MTA, which covers New York City territory, has increased their contract for homeless outreach. But for the first time ever, the Long Island Railroad is a procurement item today, has added the services of an outreach company for Nassau and Suffolk counties to help us deal with the homeless situation out on the island. So we are increasing our efforts in this regard, both in the city and out on the island. What's number 6? Ridership. Yeah.
I didn't want
Go
to
ahead, John.
interrupt your flow. I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead.
On the PTC, when is the reasonable expected date for us to have it active on the LIRR?
We have maintained all along the December of 2018 date would be completion. And what gets tricky, whether it's 2015 or 2018, is there are a lot of railroads, obviously, freight and passenger, that are all scrambling and doing as much as we can to implement these systems. And as part of the systems, there is an interoperability required. You know, we have Amtrak and New Jersey Transit that run through our territory. New York and Atlantic runs through our territory, and our railroads that have even more interfaces and interoperability issues than we do. So one of the great concerns with all these is, one, equipping all the locomotives that are required to be equipped. And you know, for every one of our MU cars, they're all considered locomotives. So we need to do the whole fleet. The freight railroad only actually needs to do the locomotives, the diesel locomotives they run. But every one of our MUs with a cab in it are considered a locomotive, and we have to outfit each and every one of them. So we have a lot of vehicles to do. The time frame to accomplish it is a tremendous challenge. One, it's a new technology. Two, the suppliers that sell this technology are stretched to the limit. The number of professionals that are out there being able to do this are in great demand right now, I would say industry-wide, which complicates it. And at the end of the day, the FRA needs to approve everybody's completed project. They need to certify, and there's obviously a mountain of literature that has to be submitted with your turning on of the system for their approval. So some of the bills that have been considered out there actually put a 3-year limit on it, but also consider the possibility of doing some of those certifications by the FRA. If everybody shows up at the last month, they just can't deal with it. Some of the legislation has considered that, but our date has always been 2018. We're still pushing to maintain that schedule. Between us and Metro North, we obviously work very closely in this effort. There are a number of issues as we go through the design process. We're in much of final design right now, and we're still debugging some of the final design issues. But on Metro North, we still have the problem of spectrum. We still don't have access to all the radio spectrum that we need out there. So it would help if we can get a push from Washington to get the FCC to help us with that radio spectrum issue.
Well, thank you for that update. I do know that I know a few others have had conversations with Chairman Prendergast, with Tom, and it's an important issue. And I do hope that it is good to hear, you know, with the committee split this month, and the issue transcends you, goes to Metro North and transcends them to you and beyond. And it's an important issue, and we do hope for either statutory or regulatory relief in Washington, but do note that the clock is ticking. And I just hope that you continue your discussions both with Metro North and with management of Tom and council, because we have to get ahead of this and not be surprised come late November that there's a problem which is purely legal in nature, because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're proceeding as fast as possible to implement, but it is literally impossible to implement and certainly get approved within the next 70 days.
Yeah, and if you might remember, and this was just before I came here, but the MTA not only awarded a contract, we actually paid an acceleration fee to the vendors to get the project done sooner. So we're doing everything that we can to try and get the project done as expeditiously as possible. But there's a lot of challenges.
Well, without taking any more time at this meeting, I mean that sincerely. I mean that you can go on for probably an hour on this topic alone, and there's certainly no point to that. But I do urge you to please stay on top of it and, you know, communicate so we're coordinated, because compliance with the law is not just an LIRR problem, it's a broader problem than that for MTA.
Yes.
And I hope you're communicating with your council and on that, and I look forward to a report probably next month on it as we see how the issue is dealt with, hopefully by responsible legislators in Washington.
Yeah, it is on the work plan for an update next month. So, but quite often that's a technical update, and what you're looking for is a little bit more. Hopefully we'll have an update on the Washington side.
Yeah, thank you.
The next item I wanted to talk about just briefly again was ridership. In September, we had more good news on the ridership front. September of 2015 was 2.7% greater than September of 2014. We moved 7.5 million people during the month. Year to date, we're up 1.9% over 2014. So the ridership continues to be a good news story for the Long Island Railroad. And the last item I wanted to mention here was a change to my staff, and it's due to the retirement of a gentleman that you've seen here for 20 years, Al Cosenza, and Al's sitting in the back there because he's pretending to be shy, but we all know better. Al has been the Executive Vice President of Long Island Railroad for 20 years, through 6 presidents. Some guy named Prendergast put him in that position a number of years ago. And he obviously has been a resource to all of us, a great sounding board and a great counsel for all of us, and I thank him on behalf of myself and all my predecessors. With great sorrow, we see Al move into retirement, but with somebody's retirement is always somebody's opportunity, and I'm happy to announce that I have selected Al's successor, and that's Elisa Pica. Lisa Pica has 28 years with the Long Island Railroad, and most recently she was our Chief Planning Officer leading our Strategic Investment Department. So it is with great joy that I announce Elisa's appointment to the Executive Vice President position for Long Island Railroad. And that concludes my remarks.
Okay, any questions on any of the board members? If not, Ira, go ahead.
On the SUS contract, I asked some people who are in the area who provide these similar services, at least on Long Island. They weren't familiar with that provider. I looked at the contract, how it was selected. I just wonder what services are they providing, and are we going to wind up in a situation, we take the people out of the stations and then they wind up back there maybe in a day or two anyway. I just wonder if someone could tell briefly what's expected, for what SUS will be doing and whenever they find someone in the station.
Judy, you want to mention it? I mean, you went through it this morning. I mean, the contract does work very closely with the counties in terms of their shelters and that type of stuff to try and get people into the shelters. So it is a cooperative process. It is one that, it's an improvement that we now have our own outreach team out there in addition to what the counties may have. So we can place a little higher priority, but that's what you mentioned is a never-ending problem in terms of trying to get them to avail themselves to the services that are out there. So we're being more proactive in that, and that's, to me, is a step forward, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
I could wait till the procurement.
Okay,
I'll wait till.
all right.
Yeah, if you had procurement questions or whatever, then they should wait to that.
Okay,
Is operations later or
It's
now?
later.
Okay, but we do have a safety report now, so I'll
Okay.
ask Lori to give the safety report.
Yep,
Good morning, everyone. I'm reporting on our safety performance through the month of August, and it can be found on pages 56 through 59 in your book. The number of employee injuries are down almost 11% from 2014 to through August of 2015. The number of FRA reportable injuries likewise are down, and that's where an employee requires more than first aid or loses time. Those are down almost 10%, and the lost time injuries themselves were down a little over 8% over the same period in 2014. Slips, trips, and falls continue to account for the greatest number of employee injuries. Our customer injuries were down over 18%, with slip, trips, and falls still remaining the biggest category, but they were down from 179 in 2014 down to 144 in 2015. And our TRACS, our Community Education and Outreach Partnership with the MTA Police, reached over 60,000 children, teens, and adults through the end of August. Moving on to our Enhanced Safety Action Update memo, which can be found, that report is on page 61. Our third quarter safety stand-down was held on October 1st and was attended by over 4,100 employees. Our confidential close call reporting program expanded on schedule on September 29th to all Suffolk yards, shops, and sidings. We continued our speed compliance efforts with 61 engineers observed during 105 radar tests during the month of September, with 24 event recorder downloads being analyzed. And our camera program continues to evolve. Preliminary designs were reviewed by the Long Island Railroad, and revisions are underway with the 4D Security Solutions contractor. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Neil?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms. Ebenhausen, just a question on the confidential close call reporting system. And I'd suggest this is not really directed at you per se, but at safety in general, whether Metro North or wider. In past meetings, I have raised the point that says that I'm most interested in knowing about the accidents that have yet to happen. We have had many discussions about grade crossings, but we really weren't talking about it until it happened. We weren't talking about sleep apnea before December 1st, 2013, and I'd like to better understand things that may happen that we're not ready to. One of the things that Mr. Mayor has said in these meetings is that the confidential close call reporting system is actually one of our sort of canary in the coal mine technique for knowing what those things may be. I see that in the for Wednesday in the Safety Committee meeting, we do have that as a topic, yes. Although in the materials I did not see much about the specifics of what we're going to learn. I'd love to know, whether today or in a future discussion, what we're learning from the confidential close call reporting system. What are those early warning indicators of potential accident types that we haven't been talking about but need to start?
Right. And I do plan on talking more in depth on Wednesday about Long Island's experience with C3RS. So yes, that will be part of that agenda for Wednesday.
Yeah, Neil, I might add that you have to remember this is a process, and we continue to roll out the process. We finally signed the agreements last winter, I guess it was.
Right, we just kicked off in March.
So we're expanding the program as we get successes throughout the system. And one of the things that everybody is going through right now is the confidential piece. You have to remember, we need to protect confidentiality, so that will be part of the system, and we need a way to present it to you that gives you the information you're looking for without violating that confidentiality.
And I want to make clear that my passion and interest for the topic is not to be confused with impatience or disregard for the effort you guys are putting in. I'm incredibly impressed by the efforts you've been putting in since those dark days of 2013, and appreciate what we're doing. And I'm just doing my best to represent the riders and the interests we all collectively have. So thank you for that. And you're right. I want to let this evolve appropriately.
Anyone else? Okay, capital construction? Michael?
Good morning. I'd like to report that in a very positive way, the fact that we have been fully funded now for the East Side access. So we're, in effect, will be able to award whatever contracts we still have left to award. We, to date, committed $7.4 billion are already out there being committed, and then the remainder will be once we acquire the additional budget. Regarding our progress in Manhattan, I'll say that right now We are moving, and there is some significance to that because we are coming in with procurement, actually, with a change order. We are moving our trailers from 48th Street to 52nd Street due to the upcoming construction around the 48th Street. And these trailers and new entrance will be at 52nd Street, and that will actually be left behind for the Long Island Railroad operation. The other important thing to mention is that along 55th Street that we have actually worked a long time there, we are now happy to say that Con Edison is going to complete their work hopefully by the end of this month. That means this week. And we have actually completed the sidewalks. We restored the sidewalks as well as we, in effect, the traffic was reopened. Verizon has finished their work, so they reopened the street to traffic, one lane for the moment, but the expectation is that we'll go forward and open the rest. One of the things that are important, and I'm sure that at the Metro North meeting was announced, that we expect to start construction for the escalator connecting the Grand Central Terminal lower level dining concourse with our concourse the Metro North dining concourse with the Long Island Railroad concourse. And that today, actually, at about 9 o'clock, we're going to start moving and closing off a certain area, obviously temporarily until we start getting everything done. Just wanted to mention the fact that we are currently monitoring dust, vibration, and noise in that area, and we'll continue to do that during construction to make sure that we're not exceeding whatever the guidelines are. The other thing that I would like to mention is the fact that we are having November 4th, we're bringing in the press, the local and national press to visit the East Side Access Caverns, and we are spending the whole day with the press. The first half is for the local and national, and the second afternoon tours are the foreign press that is very interested in what we do. For the moment, we expect to, one thing that is expected going forward is for us this week to open, we are proceeding with our procurement of the finishes on the in the caverns, both the East and West Cavern for the final station, and this week is an important timetable in which we expect to receive the prices from the various contractors. With that, actually, unless there are questions, I'm going to just finish my presentation.
Questions for Michael? If not, thank you, Michael. MTA Police report?
Yes, good morning. I'm
morning.
Deputy Chief Ernie Pasillo. I'm the commanding officer of the Long Island Railroad Region, representing Chief Mike Cohen today. As Chief Rabine pointed out, on the Long Island Railroad side, we're also experiencing a decrease in crime. It's indicated on 21 and 22 of your book, our crime stats. We've seen a overall 15% reduction in crime and in the major index crimes. We continue our efforts at homeless outreach, and we're looking forward to the contracts that will support us on Long Island and Nassau and Suffolk County for outreach that we've engaged in the past, so we think that will be very supportive of our efforts. We continue our highway grade crossing enforcement initiatives, and we're still averaging less than one index crime per day system-wide, which is, I think, very good.
Questions? If not, thank you very much. Information items, preliminary budget we did. Homeless outreach we did. Track work?
Yeah,
The planned track work is in the book. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I will say, typically we go into a mode of curtailing track outages at Thanksgiving for the Christmas season. And then, of course, we're shut down for most of it through the winter. So there's a number of things we're trying to get done. They are in your book. They're the noteworthy ones I've already mentioned, so.
Questions with regard to Ira?
Yeah, how about this coming weekend? Is anything planned? Just this,
Why, you think something's happening this coming weekend?
maybe,
You mean
maybe not.
outside the railroad? I was going to say something at the Metro North meeting, and my condolences that they don't have extra Yankee games, but I thought,
You didn't?
I didn't want to rub it in.
Motion of
Wait.
order.
Wait till next month.
No, there's nothing that would affect service to a certain point at Citi Field this weekend.
All right? Okay, procurement?
That's the railroad. Because I know I got some emails from some people saying, how could they be, this past weekend? And I said, no, the World Series is next week. So, the work we didn't affect Fort Washington that much, but affected other lines. And there's people coming from Long Island who are going to be going to Citi Field. And that was the concern. And I assume this weekend there's nothing planned?
Bruce, nothing that I'm aware of.
Basically, it's no different than most weekends for the past year. This past weekend was a major outage. You only have maybe 2 of those in a year. But we'll still be working like in the Atlantic tunnels. We'll still be doing servicing. We'll still be doing CWR, some switch component replacement. But it's normal work that we've done. It's built within our timetables, so it shouldn't really affect the operation.
Okay. Procurement?
Good morning. There are 4 procurements in this month's package totaling $5.6 million. There are 3 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $4.7 million, 1 competitive procurement in the amount of $860,000, and there are no ratifications in this month's package. The items in the non-competitive section include a request by Long Island Railroad on behalf of itself and Metro North Railroad for board approval to award contracts for a 36-month period to Nordco, Inc. in the total not to exceed amount of $775,000 for replacement parts required by the railroads to operate and maintain various pieces of Nordco and pike track equipment. The railroads use the equipment identified above to perform infrastructure maintenance along their respective right-of-ways. Nordco, who is the designer and original equipment manufacturer, is the sole responsible source for these proprietary parts, which possesses the tooling and manufacturing expertise to reliably supply these parts. Next is a request by Long Island Railroad on behalf of itself and Metro North Railroad for board approval to award a sole source omnibus contract to Siemens Industry, Inc. in the aggregate not to exceed amount of $3.5 million over a 36-month period to purchase replacement parts supporting various components installed and operated by the railroads at their respective vehicle and pedestrian crossings. Siemens is the designer and original equipment manufacturer for these proprietary assemblies and components and is therefore the sole responsible source for these parts. The last non-competitive item is a request by Long Island Railroad for MTA Board approval to award a New York State preferred source 4-month term miscellaneous service contract to New York State Industries for the disabled to perform document scanning and indexing services for Long Island Railroad's Fleet Engineering Group in the not-to-exceed amount of $387,625. That completes the non-competitive procurements. On the item
Go ahead, finish up, go ahead.
Item in the competitive section, pursuant to competitive negotiations, the railroad requests MTA Board approval to award a personal service contract to services for the underserved in the amount of $860,291. Under the contract, SUS will provide homeless outreach services at Long Island Railroad stations throughout Nassau and Suffolk counties. This contract will allow for the provision of outreach services, which shall include conducting scheduled visits to the affected locations and help identify temporary shelter, permanent housing, and/or mental health services to a homeless population that often occupies various Long Island Railroad stations, terminals, seeking shelter and food. These items are submitted for your consideration and vote.
Questions on any of the items? Ira, you had a question first?
Yeah, on
Go ahead.
the SUS contract, I noticed it says the awardee SUS is a part of the coalition of for the homeless on Long Island. I looked it up. I didn't see that they have a Long Island address, per se. I'm just wondering, they plan to run these services from a Long Island base, or?
Yes, they do.
Okay, because I only found that they had a Manhattan
And
address.
in fact, they were the only firm that could handle both Nassau and Suffolk counties out of the coalition. Others had proposed, but they couldn't fulfill the full
And they have a
scope
Long
of the-
Island office, and that's
I
what they
believe
are.
that, yes, that-
Okay, and they have we think they have a good relationship with the counties? We've checked on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Jonathan?
The one you probably could anticipate, the Siemens sole source. When I read I'm trying to find it, the summary, it appears, to the non-expert, that some of these materials seem generic enough that you could have gone to a competitive process as opposed to the non-competitive. Please explain why you didn't do so here.
In these situations, again, typically, there's proprietary software that's involved in placing some of these pieces of equipment. They have the drawings for making the materials, and because of the interconnectivity between the parts, the systems, and everything that makes those crossing gates and all the other pieces of equipment work, it becomes pretty difficult to do competitive procurements in that regard. You'd have to wind up changing for different locations, different manufacturers, pieces of equipment. It's much easier for maintenance, for more efficiencies in training, for doing the repairs, much less carrying costs for inventory. So it's mostly the systems themselves that make up the work.
Jonathan, if I could add too, that when it comes to signal equipment, there is certainly nothing that is more safety sensitive than the equipment that controls our movement of trains. And if you tried to mix in a hut that was designed and built by one firm by putting pieces in from another firm, whether it's cable, we can go out and get that competitively. But when it comes to a relay, you don't put somebody else's relay or something like that in there. And much of it nowadays is all boards. It's all electronic boards. And nobody has the same design that somebody else has. So you can't put somebody else's board into the equipment hub. So
Again, it seems to me the opposite would be the conclusion, that today things are so easily copied in the technology area that I would think that it might be easier to find a replacement, but I have to rely on your judgment.
Yeah.
The only thing that causes me pause is every time I ask a question, be it procurement, be it time schedule for trains, be it whatever, I always hear the S word as the response.
I
And
understand.
that is
but
safety. Now, it's not that we're opposed to safety, obviously it's our top priority, but safety can't get in the way of the taxpayer dollar being protected through procurement, the rider being protected through a quick schedule and the like. I mean, we can't just go drop everything we're doing because of the safety. I mean, we have to find a way to safely operate and safely procure. Is the 36-month window here, is that just to keep the costs down and you're going to come back for another 36 months? Or is that really the extent of what we will need to do on a
Well, typically,
sole source basis?
the term in many cases is driven by the pricing. Most contractors won't hold their pricing longer than that period of time, so that's why most of our multi-year contracts are in the 3-year range.
Okay, well, you're answering very well, thank you.
Any other questions? Carl?
Yeah, also, Mitch, too, isn't there a large liability problem with interfacing different parts from different companies? I mean, if something goes wrong, I would think that I wouldn't want to deal with it.
Yeah, no, believe me, anything that we can do competitively, we
Yeah,
would.
no, I understand
Okay.
the simple
But,
things, but if you're talking about a piece of machinery or it needs parts or something, and you put two things from different manufacturers in, the steel could be, everything could be different.
Yeah, and they don't make it. There's not enough business for them to be competitive with somebody else who's selling that product at the same time. So that's the problem. They're not. There's just not enough in the business world to attract somebody to do that.
Any other questions on any of the procurements? If not, motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Aye. Procurements are approved. Operations? Oh, I'm sorry. Capital construction. I apologize, my friend. I moved the page too quickly.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Capital Construction's procurement package this month consists of one item totaling $2,525,000. The item is located on page 45 of the committee book. The item is for ratification of a modification to the East Side Access Manhattan South Structures contract for the construction of a trailer office complex and alterations to the existing 52nd Street exit. The item is hereby submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions on this item? If not, motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Now, operations.
The operations report's in the book. The only thing worth noting is what I reported on last month. There were two events that greatly impacted our on-time performance this month. One was the power failure in Howard Interlocking, and the other was the New York and Atlantic derailment in the village of Westbury. So, other than that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions, Ira?
In the categories of delay, is third-party operations, that's the New York and Atlantic falls into that, and Amtrak falls into that,
Yes?
right?
Yes.
Other than Amtrak, I mean, there was a category here that said Amtrak formerly, and I see we don't have that. It's third party. Is third party mostly our Amtrak friends?
That's correct. Amtrak and New York
Atlantic, right, it's lumped together here, okay. But usually, I mean, New York and Atlantic, well, of late, they've been causing us problems, but usually they don't cause many delays at all.
That's correct. Other than their major service disruptions, they're pretty silent on the railroad.
Right, and the category customers, which the press has unfortunately taken and made that we're blaming customers for delays, that's not, I just want to make clear, that's not what we're doing here. That's a way of us analyzing and how we can address those issues. When I'm trying to grapple with what that really means. When it says like heavy loading due to the playoff games, is that classified under customers?
I mean, obviously, we build schedules, and when you have an unusual event like that, you can't leave a bunch of people on the platform because that's what our schedule says, We load as many as we can, and we try to move as many as people as quickly as we can. The other big one that falls in the customer category is just, a train quite often gets delayed when we have to have emergency response come to somebody who is in distress. And it happens more than you would think, but it does.
No, well, that I assume is customers. Someone causing a problem on the train or something happens to an individual. New York City Transit has more of it than we do. But I'm trying to figure out what else is in that category, because at Penn Station you'll get a situation where a train will come in from West Side Yard maybe only 2 or 3 minutes late. But that causes a problem, may wind up causing a delay because people have to get down to the platform. There may be another train that came in, people coming up. Is that delay classified as customers, or is that delay classified as, transportation?
On that right there, it'd be classified as customers.
But the train, okay. Well, we could talk about how to classify these things another time. It would be good to see how much is that kind of thing as opposed to actually, what I call more of an exclusive customer thing.
Customers is the overarching distinction that we try to work on standardizing, but below that, we do have several different categories that we'd be more than happy to talk about.
Yeah, remember, what you see here is a roll-up, and we always have data that's more specific.
And we're using that data to try and address problems so we have less late trains. I assume that's what,
Absolutely.
Other than the report to us is one thing, but I would hope we're using it because anyway.
Jonathan, you had a question?
when to raise it, so I'm glad Ira just raised some of those. I do understand the difficulty of classifying and using just words to convey the broad categories of reason. But it seems that this past month, there was a truly large third-party operations number, and I'm wondering why some of those weren't engineering. And I'm trying to get a feel for that.
The third-party distinction, that was during the New York Atlantic derailment, and it was significant enough that it impacted us 3 days of the month.
That also skews some of the disappointing data with respect to the performance summary?
Yes, I mean, for example, the delay at the 3 days, working off of total sum of 100%, it was over 2% impact for the entire month. And then as Pat had mentioned, also like with Harold, that was probably another percent or so above in addition to that. And then however it cascades, through the rest of the month. So that's one of the things that we are looking at from our data and everything else is, as we equate these high-level numbers and stuff behind the scenes, what is the true impact from a percentage standpoint in addition to what we're looking at from minutes. That's one of the things we've started implementing in the last couple of months. But it seemed like minutes were what we were truly judged on and stuff, but to analyze from a percentage perspective has also been very helpful on our part.
Again, a percentage of what?
Say, for instance, whenever you're looking at the overall total sum reports that's in our directory, what's happening behind the scenes is that everything is judged in minutes to say, we lost 4 hours here, we lost 3 hours here, but related to that is also scheduled number of runs that you can equate to your percentage side. And so what we're looking at is how we manage incidents, what does an incident, typically cost us from a percentage standpoint, and are there other things that we could do when we're responding to emergency events or other scenarios to understand the magnitude of just saying, oh, we just lost 5 minutes or we lost 20 minutes. There's a ripple effect that takes place on that, of what we're trying to work on.
All right. Any other questions on any of the other operation items? If not, motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. All in favor? See you in November. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I heard Pat mention November 14th. So I just said to Peter, if anything, I could do what we did contingency base, so we should be able to order this week.
Okay.
What would you implement? Because I don't know which part of it.
Yeah.
And then we'll be prepared, which
Actually,
is the contingency.
they're finalizing the schedule and everything else. That's one of the things that we're going to push over.
Okay,
to
oh,
you,
great.
So you know what's taking
Good,
place
good.
on there.
Yeah.
Our overall operation and everything else, just like what we did like this weekend. I went ahead and put together like a huge book and binder of context and everything else. We're going to probably do the same thing and be able to share with you.
Good, good. What we'll do is we'll make sure like somebody or the RCC stays in touch with their RCC, just or whoever, just to make sure we